He was the quiet one, not because he lacked something to say, but because the room was already too loud. Loud with bravado, loud with opinion, loud with men mistaking noise for authority. So, he listened. He watched. He saw the cracks behind every performance, the subtle tremble behind someone's forced laugh, the way power was flaunted to mask insecurity. He noticed what others missed, and said nothing. Not because he was weak, but because he didn't need to prove anything. At least, that's what he told himself. Because deep down, he did want to speak. He did want to lead. He did want to rise and say, "I see what's happening here, and I won't play by these rules." But something inside whispered, "Stay small. Stay quiet. Stay agreeable. Don't upset the fragile balance." He learned this early. Maybe from a father who only respected silence. Maybe from a classroom that punished too much confidence. Maybe from a society that confused humility with self-erasure. Whatever the source, he carried the lesson like a scar. Strong men are dangerous. Quiet men are safe. Be safe. So he played the part. He nodded when he disagreed. He held his tongue in meetings where mediocrity was celebrated. He laughed at jokes that insulted his intelligence. And each time, he faded a little more, like turning down the volume on his own life. A decrescendo of presence, until the man he once imagined he'd become was just a ghost walking next to him. But here's the thing about smart men. They don't lose themselves overnight. They watch themselves disappear, fully aware, fully conscious, fully capable of stopping it, but not knowing how. Because this isn't just a story about fear. This is a story about strategy. Many intelligent men hide their strength not out of cowardice, but out of calculated self-preservation. They've seen what happens to men who stand tall, the backlash, the scrutiny, the resentment. So they shrink, not because they lack the fire, but because they fear what the fire might burn down. And over time, hiding becomes a habit, restraint becomes identity, and soon, the man becomes invisible. But invisibility has a cost, because the longer he hides, the more he forgets that he's hiding. Until one day, he wakes up in a life that looks nothing like the one he wanted, a job that feels like a cage, a relationship where he can't speak his truth, a body that aches with unexpressed energy, a heart that silently screams, and in that silence, he begins to question everything. Why do I hold back? What am I afraid of? What would happen if I stopped hiding? But the answer isn't simple, because this isn't just a personal issue, it's a cultural one. We live in a world that teaches men, tone it down. Don't be too much. Don't be too confident. Don't be too intense. Don't challenge the group. Don't outshine your peers. The message is clear: play small or be punished. So the smart man complies, because he's smart enough to know the consequences of not complying. But that intelligence becomes a trap, because he uses it to rationalize his own diminishment. I'm just being diplomatic. It's not worth the fight. I'm picking my battles. I don't need the spotlight. And yet, he feels the frustration building, the dissonance between who he is and who he's pretending to be. It shows up in quiet ways: sleepless nights, chronic fatigue, a vague sense of resentment toward life, jealousy of men who take bold action, even if they're less capable. But most of all, it shows up as a disconnect from his own strength. Because here's the truth most men don't want to face. You can't selectively mute your power. If you mute it in conflict, you also mute it in creativity. If you suppress it in relationships, you suppress it in leadership. If you bury it to keep the peace, you bury it from yourself. And buried strength becomes shame, because you start to believe that the real you isn't welcome. But here's the deeper truth. You were never too much. You were just enough to threaten systems that benefit from your silence. And so, the journey back begins, not by shouting, not by overcompensating, but by reclaiming. Reclaiming the fire, reclaiming the edge, reclaiming the right to take up space. Because hiding doesn't protect you, it starves you, and you were not born to starve. This is not the story of a man who couldn't rise. This is the story of a man who chose not to, until now. Because the world doesn't need another man hiding behind false humility. It needs men who are awake, men who are rooted, men who are ready to own the strength they've been denying for far too long. It doesn't start with a major betrayal. It starts small, insidiously small. A comment you should have spoken against, but didn't. A boundary you let someone cross just this once. A desire you swallowed instead of voiced. And at first it feels noble. You tell yourself you're being mature, composed, strategic. You call it emotional intelligence. You pride yourself on not reacting. But deep down, you feel something shift. A tiny part of you slips away, and it happens again and again. Until one day, you look in the mirror, and you can't remember the last time you truly felt like yourself. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But how can a man become anything real if he's been taught to doubt his instincts? Jung knew this. The shadow, the part of us we repress, is not just darkness, it's potential, it's untapped strength, it's the power we buried to be accepted. And many men? They fear their shadow. Because what's hidden inside them isn't weakness, it's fire. Smart men, especially those aware of emotional nuance, often become experts in adaptation. They learn how to read a room. They sense what others want from them. They mold themselves to fit expectations. And for a while, it works. They earn approval. They get promotions. They maintain harmony. But it comes at a price. Because every time you adapt inauthentically, you reinforce the belief that your true self isn't enough. You become a man wearing a mask of competence, a mask of likability, a mask of humility. And behind that mask, the real you starts to decay. You no longer say what you mean. You no longer trust your instincts. You second-guess your desires. You edit your personality. You become agreeable to avoid rejection. But here's the catch. The more agreeable you become, the less visible you are. You fade into roles. You play the nice guy, the reliable one, the steady hand. But no one remembers steady hands. No one follows men who are merely agreeable. Respect isn't given to those who avoid all friction. There's a moment, quiet and terrifying, when hiding your strength becomes not just a choice, but your default setting. You don't even realize you're suppressing anymore. It feels natural, comfortable even, predictable. You stop speaking up in meetings because, what's the point? You stop setting boundaries because, I can handle it. You stop asserting your values because, I don't want to seem difficult. But all of it, every silence, every compromise, every downplayed opinion, is a quiet vote against your own worth. And slowly, your internal compass begins to malfunction. You don't know what you want anymore. You've been suppressing your desires for so long that even when you get free time, you don't know how to use it. Even when someone asks, "What do you want?" you draw a blank. Because your identity has become tied to what others want from you, not what you want for yourself. And once that cycle begins, it feeds itself. The more you compromise, the more you're seen as someone who should compromise. The more you hide your strength, the more others demand your silence. You become the go-to person for everything, except your own needs. You become the rock, but no one ever checks if the rock is cracked inside. You carry others, but no one carries you. You become useful, but not valued. Here's what's terrifying. Eventually, there's no one left telling you to stay small. No boss, no partner, no society. You've internalized the voice. You enforce your own imprisonment. You police your own boldness. You talk yourself out of dreams before anyone else can. You become the warden of your own potential. Don't say that. It'll make you look arrogant. Don't post that. It's too bold. Don't take credit. It'll make others uncomfortable. Don't want too much. It's selfish. You call it humility, but it's fear in disguise. You call it balance, but it's self-abandonment. You tell yourself you're being wise, when really, you're just trying to stay safe. Ironically, it's the smartest men who fall into this trap, because you're not ignorant, you're observant. You see the power games. You see how bold men get cut down. You see how the world punishes strength when it's unapologetic. So you adapt, you blend, you become inoffensive. You hide just enough to stay liked, and lose just enough to stay lost. But intelligence isn't freedom, not if you use it to justify your own disappearance. Eventually, every part of life becomes performative. Your relationships, you play roles to keep the peace. Your career, you do what's expected, not what's fulfilling. Your body, you ignore its signals, push through the burnout. Your passions, they're hobbies now, casual, unimportant. You are no longer living, you're performing survival. And beneath that performance, lies a man who knows he's capable of so much more. But he's tired. Tired of trying to make it work, while never feeling fully alive. And so, he stays in his comfort zone, which is just a fancy name for a prison with nice furniture. But then something happens. Maybe it's subtle. Maybe it's catastrophic. A breakup, a job loss, a health scare, or just an unbearable boredom. And in that moment, you see it. The reflection staring back isn't you, it's the man you became to survive, not the man you were meant to become. And suddenly, all the compromises, all the politeness, all the strategic silences crash down like a house of cards. You realize you didn't protect yourself. You erased yourself. And now, you want yourself back. Not the version others loved. Not the version that got by. Not the version that played nice. The real you. The bold one. The decisive one. The one who doesn't apologize for his strength, but wields it responsibly. The one who knows that shrinking doesn't serve anyone, and that your strength was never the problem, only the fear of how others would react to it. Every decision you make out of fear instead of conviction, every moment you hesitate instead of act, every yes you utter when you meant no, they seem harmless in the moment. But over time, they accumulate, and the weight of those small betrayals becomes unbearable. This is what most smart men don't realize. You don't need a tragedy to lose your life. You just need to live small long enough. When you build your life on pleasing others, you build a house with no foundation. Your career? It's shaped by what others think is impressive. Your relationships? Chosen to avoid loneliness, not aligned with purpose. Your routines? Dictated by obligation, not inspiration. And eventually, that house starts to creak. You feel unstable. You question your path. Not because something dramatic went wrong, but because nothing feels fully right. You wake up in the morning with a sense of invisible pressure, not from deadlines or expectations, but from the quiet question whispering, is this really all I'm here for? Playing small isn't just about what you do. It's about what you no longer allow yourself to imagine. At one point, you had big visions. You had bold goals. You had the courage to dream audaciously. But over time, you taught yourself not to trust those visions. You called them unrealistic, immature, naive, and so you let them die quietly, without protest, without ceremony. But here's the tragedy. When you bury your vision, you bury your future. Because a man without a compelling vision will eventually submit to a life that doesn't inspire him. Comfort can be deadly, not because it's wrong to rest or recharge, but because comfort, when worshipped, becomes a coffin. Comfort convinces you that discomfort equals sign danger, that challenge equals sign stress, that boldness equals sign recklessness. And so, you shrink. You decline opportunities that might stretch you. You avoid conversations that might confront you. You choose routine over reinvention. But inside, you feel the stagnation. You feel the dullness. You feel the fire dying out. Because men weren't built to just manage life. We were built to build life, to forge paths, to carry weight, to protect, create, and lead. You can't do any of that when you're always chasing comfort. Ironically, the more agreeable you become, the more disconnected you feel in relationships. Why? Because people can feel when you're withholding. They can sense when you're present physically, but absent emotionally. When you avoid conflict at all costs, you don't create harmony, you create distance. Your partner may say, you never open up anymore. Your friends may say, you're hard to read. And deep down, you know it's true. Because you stopped sharing the real you a long time ago. You became a curated man, digestible, polite, predictable. But love doesn't thrive in politeness. It thrives in truth, in passion, in the willingness to be seen fully, flaws and all. When you hide your strength, you also hide your heart. And you can't connect deeply if you're only offering a diluted version of yourself. You may think you're playing it safe at work by being agreeable, by avoiding conflict, by never challenging the norm. But what you're really doing is becoming invisible. The man who hides his perspective in meetings, ignored. The man who avoids asking for a raise or promotion, underpaid. The man who never questions leadership, stagnant. And the sad part is, you probably know you're capable of more. But capability without courage just leads to quiet frustration. You see other men rise, men less qualified than you, less thoughtful, less experienced. And you wonder, why him and not me? The answer is simple. He spoke up. You didn't. He took the risk. You rationalized the fear. He was willing to own his space. You were still waiting for permission. One of the biggest costs of hiding your strength is emotional deadness. You don't just suppress anger or ambition. You suppress everything, including joy, excitement, hope, desire, because you can't selectively numb emotions. When you block one, you dull them all. You become emotionally flat. You laugh less. You love less. You risk less. And yet, you feel a pressure building, a scream that never gets voiced, a rage that has no outlet, a hunger that remains unspoken. This is why men implode. Not because they're violent, not because they're weak, but because they've been silenced for so long, they don't know how to be human anymore. When you suppress your strength long enough, it doesn't disappear. It mutates. It becomes passive aggression, addiction, compulsive distraction, overwhelm, sudden burnout, or worst of all, it shows up in moments of explosive overcorrection. One day you just snap, quit the job, end the relationship, walk away from everything, not because of one event, but because of the accumulated weight of silence. You break down, or break free, or both. And the people around you say, "Where did that come from?" But you know, you've felt the pressure for years. You just never had the space or the permission to release it. More than anything, hiding your strength costs you your spirit. That sense of aliveness, that quiet fire that says, "I was born to do something meaningful." That gets dimmer with every year of playing small. Until one day, you stop dreaming altogether. You stop praying for more. You stop believing that greatness is even an option. You don't fear failure anymore. You fear that nothing will ever change, that this is it. And that is a slow, spiritual death. So ask yourself, right now, without overthinking, where in my life am I playing small? Where have I silenced my strength to keep the peace? Where have I betrayed myself to stay liked? And more importantly, what has it cost me? Because the moment you name the cost, you start reclaiming your power. The cost may be a dream you abandoned, a truth you buried, a relationship you settled for, a version of yourself you haven't seen in years. But naming it is the first step, feeling it is the second, and doing something about it, that's when you begin to rise again. You are not here to be agreeable. You are not here to be small. You are not here to manage people's expectations. You are here to become the kind of man who can stand firm in who he is without apology, to show up fully, to speak truth, to take up space. You can't inspire anyone from the shadows. You can't protect anyone while hiding. You can't change anything by staying silent. The world isn't lacking in polite men. It's craving honest ones, strong ones, men who haven't forgotten who they were before they began to censor themselves. So here we are, at the edge, not of breakdown, but of breakthrough. You now know what it costs to hide your strength. And maybe for the first time in a long time, you're ready to stop shrinking, to stop apologizing, to stop playing small. But the real question is, how do you rise again? How do you reclaim the strength you buried? How do you live in your full power, without arrogance, without fear? If this message spoke to something deep in you, if you felt seen, challenged, or awakened, then this is just the beginning. Hit subscribe. Turn on that notification bell. You're not alone in this. Thousands of other men are rising with you. See you in the next one.